Okay, welcome to this webinar. We're going to discuss typical mistakes in Agile project management. I'm surrounded by a great team behind the scenes. You'll be seeing, some flashy slides and things. I hope you enjoy this 45-minute long webinar. This is live, so anything could happen. I have some people doing some work here, some helicopters here next to the U.S. Embassy here in Madrid. Just be ready for the unexpected. I certainly am. So I'm going to show you my screen now, so you see some slides that I have. Um, this is a great webinar for you to attend, whether you have not yet entered the Agile world, whether you have some initial knowledge, you're experimenting with that, and perhaps just a few months, or perhaps this COVID thing forced you to go full remote, and then you needed to do some digital, team thing, and someone suggested that you should go Agile for that. Or perhaps this is also going to be useful if you have already some experience in Agile. For different people, it's going to have different benefits, or at least that's what I'm hoping for. So let me please introduce myself. This is me. I'm Pablo. You can find me on social networks, mainly Twitter, at Diacritica. But of course, I'm always listening to these at Taiga.io and at Kaleidos.net social network accounts. I'm CEO at Taiga and Kaleidos, and I've been doing Agile since 2007. I have to say that really, when you see this CEO at Taiga and Kaleidos, the only thing that really matters here is Kaleidos, because Taiga is actually a product by Kaleidos. That's the parent company. You can see by the picture that I love archery, traditional archery. Let me please take this opportunity to suggest that everyone, in their vicinity, in their town, city, explores this amazing thing that is archery, that actually unites every culture in the world. This has been an activity that every culture, every people have been enjoying since prehistoric times. So just in case you're wondering, this is a great passion and sport to enjoy. Some credits here are due art by cocomaterial.com. If you see some clippers and you think, oh, I like that clipper for my slides, you should check cocomaterial.com. It's open content by Esther. And the slides design were used, the design was, we used penpod.app, which is the sister project for Taiga. This is a design and prototype tool, web-based and everything. I'm not going to cover that, but if you're into design or prototyping in software development, particularly in software development, you should check penpod.app, which just actually went out for the beta stage. We're very proud of that. Okay, so just let's go with this webinar. I have so many things to share with you. If I'm going to share my experience dealing with typical mistakes in Agile, I should initially at least do some Agile in a nutshell thing, right? And I think it's fair to go back to the origins of the Agile mindset or the Agile culture, you name it, and that's the Agile Manifesto. So the date of the Agile Manifesto, the year, is actually quite telling. It was signed back in 2001. Now, a historical note here is quite important. What happened in 2001, or what had recently happened, that was the context in which some people needed to meet together and write this manifesto? Well, we had the Millennium Bug, that nasty software bug that meant that a lot of software running the world probably was not prepared to go from 99 to 00 in terms of date management. That in the 60s and 70s, that was not an issue. Plenty of years still to come. But over the turn of the century and the millennium, that was a problematic issue. It was called the millennium bug, and lots of money were invested actually in trying to determine whether your software was going to be affected. And it proved it was very difficult to know. So it was not a great time to be proud about software development. It's like, this is not future proof. And the other thing that actually had happened was the dot-com bubble burst. So all this speculation about becoming absolutely rich through Silicon Valley, schemes was a thing from the past. And so again, through software, there was a sort of public relations crisis. It's not that you didn't there was no problem in terms of earning money or being a quite interesting industry to working. No, but the recent events were in a way telling software developers that there should be a better way to do this and do some sustainable and valid software. So Agile Manifesto 2001, and this is so simple. You get this. I'm going to read it out. Individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Then working software over comprehensive documentation. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. And finally, responding to change over following a plan. Now, it's important to note that we have over as the term that unites individuals' interactions and processes and tools. This over doesn't mean versus, and this is important for you to note. It's not an anti-processes and tools. Agile is not anti-comprehensive documentation or anti having a plan. It's basically saying that what goes to the left has precedence to what goes to the right of the every sentence. Or to put it in other words, have enough and significantly valued processes and tools to foster individuals' interaction. What is actually interesting to have in terms of documentation that will help having working software. So this is not a battle. It's not like super like black and white. Although, of course, Agile Manifesto will always pursue the left parts of the manifesto as key principles to keep in mind. Okay, so I hope this is a nice review again of the Agile Manifesto in case you didn't know about the Agile Manifesto, or in case you're going to read it for the first time and want to have like the good explanation. But there are more misconceptions that arose from the Agile Manifesto. And these are things that are shortcuts, mental shortcuts that even people understanding what the Agile Manifesto means, tend to repeat, believing is going to actually help them, um, convince teams and organizations embrace Agile. And this is things that you probably have heard already. Agile is short iteration cycles. Agile is faster, meaning you develop software development faster. Agile is not about estimations. It's actually anti-estimation. Agile is cheaper, meaning Agile makes your own process in terms of software development cheaper than competing techniques or competing mindsets or methodologies. Agile is actually Scrum, Kanban, or this melange called Scrumban. So, mixing Agile principles with particular techniques. And finally, also, Agile needs Scrum Master or Agile Coach to be successful. Again, no, actually, Agile is not about short iteration cycles. Agile has a more intellectual aspiration about the processes and is more about continuous improvement that might lead to short iteration cycles if that actually improves that team quality. Agile is faster, could be, but most importantly, Agile is adaptive. Agile is against estimation. Well, Agile is about no bullshit estimation. Just take the relevant amount of estimation at the right time, and that will be actually quite agile, pro-agile. Agile is cheaper. Mm, Agile is not necessarily obsessed about being cheap or having, a better return of investment in terms of money. But what is obsessed, what Agile really wants is to reduce the waste in the process. I was fortunate enough to share the stage with Ari van Bennekom, one of the Agile Manifesto signatures, 2 years ago before the lockdown, and he basically just sticks with this. If you've listened to Ari van Bennekom, you'll see that he basically uh, explains how Agile is there to reduce or annihilate waste, and how that then has amazing ripple effects and consequences that improve overall processes. Agile is Scrum, Kanban, or Scrumban. Agile is the manifesto. There are many ways you can implement the manifesto. Of course, Scrum, Kanban, or Scrumban, or others are compatible. Extreme programming and many other things are true Agile techniques. But Agile, just goes above all of them. It's just, it's at a different level. And finally, Agile needs Scrum Master or Agile Coach. Well, what Agile really needs is empowered teams. Sometimes you need some help to get to empower teams, but it's not like by design you need someone with a specific role monitoring the quality of Agile. If you get empowered teams, you might not need it. Okay, so far so good. Before I go into the core of these webinar, which are these top 4 anti-patterns or mistakes that we found people, just mistakes they make doing Agile, I would like to briefly cover Scrum and Kanban, because internet, YouTube, blogs are all, you find Scrum and Kanban immediately when you look for Agile. I'm not going to go into detail like what is Scrum and all the artifacts or Kanban and the metrics. I think if you don't know about Scrum and Kanban, I think you can read a lot or watch any videos after this webinar. But I do want to check on the promises of these techniques, these particular techniques. Well, here you can see a nice shot of Taiga's Kanban module. In this case, you can see a quite, we like this project a lot. This is a demo project. This is the Princess Bride movie. So if you enjoy the movie or the book, you'll get some of the jokes. But basically, Kanban is this board where you have from left to right different columns and statuses, and you need to bring things from a new state or some initial left state to a rightmost state. That will mean some sort of closeness. And you can have swim lanes and things like that, and you have metrics and things. But basically, this is an organic succession of work that has to be done. Well, Kanban's promise says that if you can achieve individual empowerment, and this is very related to Lean principles, where at every level you are delegating the most responsibility that you can give away. So any individual knows that they can do the most with their autonomy. So if you can achieve individual empowerment along those lines and clear policies so that everyone is on the same page about when to do some things, how to react, how negotiation actually works, what is top priority, what is not top priority. If you get that, Kanban will deliver you organic succession of finished work while avoiding bottlenecks. I mean, this is an amazing promise to make. Truth is that this doesn't really happen that often, because Kanban might try its best to deliver that, but if the premises are not there, you're not going to get that benefit. If we go to Scrum, where instead you have this backlog of user stories, that's the term for the things that you have to develop to provide any value to a product owner or any stakeholder. That backlog is prioritized, so order matters. The things that are at the top are considered to be top priority. So you need to work on them because they are strong candidates to fit into these sprints, which are fixed time, slots. Perhaps they last 2 weeks. We've seen from 1 week long sprints to 2 month long sprints. It's a matter of team preference and what works best. So you have this backlog, you have those sprints, and Scrum promises basically will tell you that if you can achieve team commitment, the Scrum will deliver minimum waste and high predictability. This is again an amazing promise to make, and who doesn't want high predictability, particularly in software development industry, where everything is so chaotic. Who doesn't want minimum waste? That cognitive load that comes with believing that you're basically not focused at all. So we'll come back to team commitment, because one of the anti-patterns, if not two of those mistakes I'm going to cover, are related to that. But this is Scrum Promise, and it's not exactly the same as Kanban, but so some people try to have best of the worlds and have this Scrumban and have like two promises for the price of one. Okay, so before I go into the mistakes, let me please share my very private experience on which one of these agile techniques is better for inexperienced agile teams. From my experience and Kaleido's experiences and Taiga experience, Kanban requires a much more mature teams in terms of agile. Now, it's so deceptively simple that most teams will start with Kanban, but that apparently that simplistic aesthetics does hide tremendous needs for agile maturity in the team, and not only the team, but at the individual level. So beware of the apparent simplicity of Kanban, because it's a powerful technique, but don't go there unaware of the risks of not understanding how challenging that could be. On the other hand, Scrum is deceptively bureaucratic. It looks like it has these artifacts, these meetings, these liturgies, right? The dailies, the demos, the retrospectives, and estimating user stories, priorities, the user stories themselves. You've got sprints, you have product owners, you have all this vocabulary, and people might feel daunted, like, whoa, this is too complex. It reminds me of old style techniques. So I'll go for this simple Kanban. But actually, Scrum is deceptively bureaucratic, is actually easier. So probably Scrum is a better technique to start with Agile. But what if that goes wrong? Wait till the end of the webinar. Okay. Just looking, checking. I'm on time. I think I'm doing okay so far. And we got the top 4 Agile anti-patterns. Now, the webinar title doesn't include the term anti-patterns. It uses mistakes, just because it's, people get it. It's like mistakes, something went wrong, right? But I do prefer to use the anti-pattern term, because it does reflect the subtlety in that it is a mistake that was created by a slow erosion or coming from old habits, where you are unaware or unknowingly, adapt to something that is going to end up in dysfunctional Agile. So this is our behavioral patterns coming from, previous comfort zones that, if not identified and diagnosed correctly in time, will eventually evolve into something that looks like it's Agile, but it's actually anti-Agile. And so that is the anti-pattern thing. Now, why I'm saying top 4? It's like I wrote a book on this, and we like lists or something. Well, this is where developing Taiga comes into play, because it is a privileged observatory. If you are developing an Agile project management platform, you can actually listen to what's going on. So we are not agile consultants. We are not agile coaches. We are not. Our business is not to coach teams or organizations to become more agile. Our role, the one we chose for ourselves, is to actually develop the platform where teams can become agile, organizations can become agile with little or no effort. Now, Taiga is open source. Taiga is an open source platform, and that means developing in the open. And when you develop in the open, you are typically more inclined to listen to your users and to the community. And to listen to the community mean that you will respectfully listen to feature requests, right? I mean, this happens even with non-open source software, but it's definitely a thing in open source. Partly because some of the feature requests might be developed by the community itself. So it's a big deal. And through those feature requests, coming at first, we had 100 users, then we have thousands of users, then tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands, then millions of users. Now, millions of users channeling their feature requests through the available, spaces that we have. You can learn the anti-patterns, the agile anti-patterns that are actually fueling those feature requests. So I'll give you an example. Typically, we'll get an amazing kudos style email, and we immediately circulate that in the team, like, you guys rock. Taiga is an amazing tool. It's easy to get started with Agile, so flexible. The UI is so slick, very intuitive. We are using here, and the people from the law department, devs are also really happy that the rest of the non-devs are enjoying Agile through Taiga. All this stuff, you have Kanban, you have Scrum, all that. But then at some point, you read but. Okay, you read but, if only, but. And we almost anticipate that it's going to happen. I mean, not always, but it's not rare to see that but. And after that but, there comes a feature request that not every time, but many times does represent an agile anti-pattern at work. So here today, I'm going to share you not exactly, not the feature requests themselves, but the unearthed anti-patterns that explain those feature requests. I hope you get this idea that we were able to uncover the agile anti-patterns that would actually give birth to those feature requests. So let's go for the first one, right? All right. I'm going to read this aloud because I think it helps. So again, this is not how the feature request actually comes, but this is what is really the underlying issue. So this is the Agile anti-pattern number 1, workflows and ISO compliant permissions. That's how we call it, or comply with ISO. In this organization, it is important to follow a specific process of approvals and revisions to comply with ISO standards, and that implies workflows with very specific permissions so that nobody can make mistakes. Now, there is a fallacy and a problem here. If you're familiar with ISO, you've already spotted the fallacy. The fallacy is that ISO standards, the international standard organization, and ISO 27000, 1001, 9, all these security process quality certifications. If ISO has survived so well over the years, it is precisely because they make sure, quite smart, not to mix processes or goals or aims or objectives with specific implementations. I mean, it is untrue that ISO will force a hyper fiscalization of certain workflows. That is not true. It doesn't mean that some ISO auditing consultants will just give you a lot of work and and checklist and all that. That's one of the many implementations, but it's not the only implementation of ISO. So that is a fallacy. That's believing that your particular existing implementation of ISO invalidates going into Agile. The problem with this is that that specific implementation is going to favor a minimal delegation in contrast to Agile's maximum delegation of responsibilities. The objective in Agile is to give actors of an organization the maximum responsibility. This is there to favor the autonomy of the teams. ISO has nothing to say in this regard, no matter how much some consultants insist on it. So if ISO regulations are going to be the excuse to say, okay, we'll go Agile, but we have to be this ISO compliant thing, and that means that you have passive participants in this Agile model, then instead of allowing team members to be protagonists and take risks, if you go that route, I can tell you already, it's impossible that the preconditions of Agile's promises are going to be met. I'm seeing some people nodding right now, particularly people in big, medium-sized, big organizations saying, yeah, that's so true. Okay, so that's the first one. Let's go to the second Agile anti-pattern. Team's commitment is not respected. This is one of my favorites, and it comes like this. Well, actually, it doesn't really come like this, but I'm going. You'll see how these uncovers. In this organization, we want to be able to intervene halfway through the sprint. Remember, sprint is that short, that iteration cycle in Scrum where you commit to deliver something by the end in a sprint demo, right? That is a protected space. That is a very, very respected space where the team knows that it is untouchable, and that's why the team can commit to a certain deliverable. So I go on. But if the team is moving faster than expected, we want to be able to add more tasks. If new priorities have emerged in the backlog, so the things that actually only are treated before the next sprint, we want to be able to make an urgent interruption. In terms of feature requests for Taiga, this doesn't come like this. It is the reverse request that usually is what we listen. We listen from teams themselves saying, please, we are tired of getting things added in the middle of a sprint. We need Taiga to prevent certain users from doing this to us, because this is felt like an attack to the team commitment. Now, as I said, if you remember the promise, the Scrum's promise, Scrum as an Agile methodology needs teams to make commitments, with a delivery at the end of the sprint. This is important. This key commitment is dynamited when a stakeholder modifies an ongoing sprint, and generates a lot of frustration. Imagine yourself, you're a team. You have the top priority user stories in the backlog. You've seen that more or less you can commit to deliver finished user stories this amount. You move it to the sprint at the sprint planning, and mid-sprint there is chaos. Things change, not because you want it to change, but some external force did it for you. It's most probably the sprint demo is not going to be a fun time, right? And who's to blame? In an agile technique such as Scrum, where the team gets a lot of credit, but also gets all the blame, if you don't make this visible, the team will just get overly frustrated. This anti-pattern of not respecting the team's commitment is usually followed on by a rush forward, which is to transition to Kanban, where this is okay. But I'll go back to this by the end of the webinar. because this is now a trend. This is a thing. I start with Scrum. It's not working. I'll transition to Kanban, where all this chaos is actually legal. But this is actually there's some problems there. Okay, let's go for the next one. It's let me just see where this here. Third, everything for the sprint's velocity. All hail the sprint's velocity. I'm not going to cover here whether sprint's velocity is something in Scrum that is good or bad. But once you have accepted that, the agile anti-pattern that arises sometimes. So again, the in Scrum, okay, uh, only user stories completed in a sprint can add their story points. That causes partial jobs or partial works not to count for a sprint speed and give a bad image. Okay. This is one of my favorite anti-patterns, and is one of the most controversial with really eternal threads of discussion in terms of the feature request. Like, what's going on here? People in Scrum are expected to finish up some amount of user stories that account for a number of user story points by the end of the sprint. But Scrum is quite strict when it comes to say whether you can get credit for this amount of user story points. You can only take credit if they are actually finished. And finished is, as I say, quite strict. It's not just that the team believes it's finished, it's that someone else, like the product owner or some relevant stakeholders, do validate that during the sprint demo. Now, since Scrum is about finished stuff that theoretically go into production, anything that is partial, anything that is mid-cooked, halfway cooked, does not count as value that you delivered, because you cannot put into production something that is just 50% done, right? Either it's done or not. And so you could actually end up in a sprint with, let's say, 6 user stories amounting for 60 user story points. 3 of them are 90% done, and the other 3 have some problems from the perspective of the product owner. So they are not validated. They have some issues. They cannot say, check, done. How many user story points do you actually give to that sprint? 60, 55, 38? Well, actually, the correct answer by Scrum's standard is 0. Now, you could imagine a team saying, no way, 0? Really? Is that everything we did? All these efforts, all these stress towards the end of the sprint, and it just gives us a 0? It's just only 2 days left, and we will have 60 points worth of value delivered. So it is not. I mean, it's logical that teams would like to have some credit. If not 60, I'll do with 40, right? Now I'm going to show you a Scrum burn down. As the name implies, this is showing the rate at which you are like burning down user stories by measuring their size in terms of value, right? Here you can see that we started with the project, 1850 project points, and of which 1551 were actually defined in user stories. Then anyway, what I wanted you to focus here is this is amazing burn down. It's like we have a smooth linear speed. The average here is 58. And the team is like here at the bottom left, really enjoying this. Like, wow, look at this. Now, if you are actually measuring effort, partial work, you're going to get this for free. You're not going to have this roller coaster burn down, where you have sprints where you almost did have everything, but you get only a tiny portion of the points, and then the next sprint you get double that because you get for free, almost for free, all the points that you carried over through the user story, through the user stories that didn't get finished, but now they were finished, and then the things that you added to the current sprint. So you learn much more from a roller coaster burn down than from a smooth. Here you have a lot of issues and they could be hidden. I mean, I'm saying this is bad, but what I'm saying is this, you have to be able to explain what's going on here. Because a good burn down chart is almost the holy grail of Scrum. It represents a good pace of closing user stories. But yeah, as I said, the problem arises when we fail to close user stories and still pretend to count a significant percentage of the points linked to those stories. Now, why do we have that issue? What is the origin of this disastrous sprints? Well, most often bad estimates at the beginning of the project. That's easy to justify. You don't really know. You have to learn how to estimate not only the user stories, but how many points the team can actually cover in a sprint, right? That's something you learn by doing. Another mistake that's going on here could be the tendency to start all user stories on the first day of the sprint, and then thinking we can do this in parallel, and then trying to close them all at once just before the demo, which is quite risky. You end up with this risky 0 points. You get 0 points for this sprint because nothing was really finished. Or the very last anti-pattern that we just explained, team commitment is not being respected. That also could be behind this issue with not finishing user stories. But the solution should never be give me some percentage of the user story. They give me some credit, so I avoid these uncomfortable conversations with stakeholders, because those nobody wants to have uncomfortable conversations. The elephant in the room, about chaotic speed, right? Remember, Scrum is there to give you predictable future. Chaotic burn down doesn't give you predictable future, so you will have that uncomfortable conversation. And the last Agile anti-pattern that we detect through Taiga feature requests is the early planning, but like obsessively early planning. And this goes like this. Like in this organization, we have implemented Agile with Scrum. We created a backlog, prioritized it, estimated, and then created all the filled-in sprints to know when we will have all the functionalities finished. So basically, I created the backlog. I like this idea, things to do. Then I estimate everything. So I go user story by user story and do this detailed analysis of how much time, regardless of the value that provides the time, because this is very, very much a thing here. And then I basically decide on the speed at the beginning. Like I'll say we have this team size. This is the amount of this is the speed, and through that I can just basically do some calcula and create as many sprints as needed, provided that we end by the time we need to finish. So like there is a constraint in time. This is absurd, right? I mean, Scrum, Kanban, any lean model or agile model will manage advanced planning very poorly when the quality of the information is low, which is typical. The quality of information is low in general. Therefore, to estimate, evaluate, prioritize, and develop, it is recommended to wait for the optimal moment. There's this thing called the last responsible moment, but in general, the optimal moment. Remember, Agile is about reducing waste, and there's a lot of waste in early estimation and early planning. There are people who cannot assimilate this vision. I mean, this comes from managers, organizations with very. We do see, and I'm going to pretend how to put this. This comes typically from managers that do not like Agile, that are quite comfortable with how things have been doing, for the organization the past 2 decades. But they have the pressure of the teams. The teams, beg for agile. Any agile technique will work, will do. They're happy, just they want to change it's software development or is any activity that actually benefits from agile. And so they sometimes will say, okay, you get agile as long as I get exactly the same I was getting, for the past decade, which didn't work, but I feel I have some control over it. So no wonder they want to have everything early planned, dates fixed, deterministic planning. It's not going to work. It never were. It never was a thing that was working. But actually, agile is going to have a lot of friction with that. So it's this is not just nonsense, but it will result in chaos in every small replanning, because agile will allow you to accept change as something that is okay. Change in other techniques, in other mindsets, it's a problem. Therefore, you have this change management process, which leads a ton of waste. but here, the moment you are basically not making sure the sprints go well, you have this ripple effect. So it's really problematic. But we get this feature request. Agile's promise is that for any given future date, the product that you get will have top value, least waste. Okay, whatever that means, you'll see along the way. Waterfall, on the other hand, goes the reverse path. It might guarantee that some products will contain for a given date something, but doesn't really worry much about the value delivered or how much waste is generated through the process. So they're really antagonistic. And so you cannot have both and pretend everything's okay. You cannot say, okay, team, go with agile, whatever you want, as long as I have this waterfall concept still applied. It's not going to work. This happens a lot. I like to, before I go towards the end of the webinar, share with you one big fat lie that has already been covered, actually. But I want to be super focused on this now. And the big fat lie that gets repeated all the time is that Agile tells you not to estimate. This is not true. For one, Agile Manifesto doesn't even mention estimates. Now, I do get that the Agile Manifesto could be used to promote or to defend that estimates fuel comprehensive documentation. I get that, it makes some sense. Or that estimating something that you have to do before you have to do it serves to the follow-up plan or following a plan. Remember, that was the respond to change over following a plan. Because it seems like you estimate things because you're going to develop that. You're going to develop that because it's part of the plan. So yeah, comprehensive documentation and following a plan are right parts. So I get why this is so trendy, right? But the truth is that more often than not, estimates impact priority, which is very agile centric. Adds quality to the task, because through estimation you can actually you probably need to define a little bit more what the task means or what the task is either to provide as a benefit, some business value or any type of value, and also provides a space around the team, which is very agile, well, the team members can double check they're on the same page. Some of you probably have heard about this poker planning technique. It's not actually planning, it would be more poker estimating, where individual team members have this deck of cards. They hide them. They are either sizes like XS, S, ML, XX, XL, things like that, or 1, 3, 5, 7, Fibonacci style, up to 20, 40, whatever they fancy. And then task by task or user story by user story, they simultaneously will say, I think it's three. They have this common idea, shared vision of what three means, and they go like this. Now, if there's some shared numbers there or sizes, like you said 7, she said 5, I say 9 or 7, okay, it looks like we are okay with the task. But if I say 1 and you say 20 and the other one says 40, clearly this user story or this piece of work needs to be further analyzed. We're not on the same page. So that is a waste reducer. That is actually tackling the unknown, or the unknown actually. So estimates could help your team feel more in control. Uh, Not that you need to do super detailed estimates for every single user story, but this is something to bear in mind. It's useful, and Agile says so. Now, I do get it that it happens that many teams, in order to escape these enormous waste and cognitive load that these detailed estimates requests bring, they favor this interpretation of agile means no estimates motto. I'll show you an anecdote, but I was witnessing in a project a few years ago. The team was doing okay with the sprints. They got great velocity and all that, and they were very mature in terms of agile and the Scrum technique and all the processes that come with it. And the product owner would sometimes pick a user story in the backlog recently added, so like well below, and would put it on top. So top priority, suddenly, mid-sprint. Now this team, this Scrum team, feeling quite responsible for what is going to come next. Not now, mid-sprint is respected, but the next sprint is going to take the topmost user stories, right? The top priority ones, as long as they allocate a number of user story points that the team can cope with. And they would immediately trigger that would immediately trigger the estimation process. Then the product owner would see the result, 20, oh, 20, then no big deal. I thought it was going to be cheaper. Goes back. And again, the product owner would do this trick, this nasty little trick of putting things in this artificial top priority only to trigger a legal estimation process. Now, I mean, you don't do that to your team, right? There's a problem in terms of conversation and honesty there. So, but this happens, and so some teams say, could I actually escape from this waste that is estimating things that are never going to get done because they don't really have priority? And so this is the end of the webinar. Before we get to final remarks and some time for questions, this is one of the top reasons why teams that initially embrace Agile through Scrum, experimenting some Agile anti-patterns that are really deep within their processes, decide that perhaps we will swap it for Kanban, because Kanban is okay with no estimates, because Kanban is okay with interruptions, it's legal, it's okay, there is no specific commitment in terms of what will need to be done by certain dates, as long as there's this organic succession. Now, of course, Kanban has its own artifacts, like the work in progress limit, where you set it to a certain number and you can identify per column, per state, whether there is a bottleneck building up. But I mean, ask yourself this: if you have experienced this transition from Scrum to Kanban, you use WIP limits, you use that, and you are like monitoring that. How often you basically stop pretending they are any value? It says most of the time you basically concede victory to the overwhelming bottleneck thing that you have in front of you. Why? Is it because Kanban is not for you? No, because you were experiencing the same Agile anti-patterns. And if you have that agile anti-pattern, at the core of your team processes and mindset, no matter which agile technique you pick, it doesn't matter. You're going to basically suffer from that in different ways, perhaps. So that's this initial, perceiveness of this is what we were suffering here. Now is going to be okay. Initially, it gives you some peace of mind, but in the end, it's still dysfunctional agile. And this is probably the final remark. The biggest enemy, for to agile is not all the techniques, is not waterfall or sigma, whatever you feel competes with agile in terms of either principles or specific techniques. It's not that. The biggest enemy is dysfunctional agile. And dysfunctional agile is what you get when you keep old habits dressed up in agile vocabulary. Because vocabulary is great, and some liturgies and some artifacts are great, but in essence, if you're not following the Agile Manifesto, if you're not true to that, you're going to end up in this dysfunctional agile. It's not going to be obvious at first. This is something that builds up. This, as I was saying, this erodes slowly, and at some point, you basically are in crisis and you don't know what to do. You've lost faith in anything. You are lost, and you probably are considering that the whole agile thing is wrong. It could be for your industry, your activity, or your team. It could be. I'm not saying agile is the only solution, the silver bullet for everything, but chances are that you were experiencing dysfunctional agile. And with this, we have, I think, some time for some questions and answers. I hope you've enjoyed the webinar, and I'll be happy to. We have, I think, close to 10 minutes before we get the hour-long webinar over. So let's see. Yeah, is it possible? Yeah. So Richard says, is it possible to apply Scrum if the development team has to do tasks not coming from the backlog, like customer support during the sprint? How to break out of that anti-pattern? It's very good question. I think you could actually consider that as a measure of how much capacity and commitment the team can put into continuing to develop the product, and do that as a function of what has to be protected for dealing with other things like issues, bugs, and things, or not bugs, because ideally bugs are part of the user story development process, but interruptions from customer support. So I think what works best is to go into sprint planning already allocating some amount of time and mindset and mindshare to that. Actually, that triggered a feature request for Taiga a few years ago, and so in a sprint, you're mentioning Scrum, so I can say this in a sprint task board, you can add issues like that are part of the sprint. So you can have your marvelous, beautiful board of user stories and the tasks and everything, and you have your sprint burn down. But you can always take a look at support questions or things that are added and linked to the sprint. They can live elsewhere. They can live under the issues module, but you can add that. So think of it in terms of team commitment at the sprint planning stage, and I think you'll probably get a nice solution to that. Yeah, Jens. So we're working on many projects at the same time. Taiga doesn't have a shared Kanban view, so we program our own our own using the Taiga API. Okay, are more features for multi-project teams planned? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, working on many projects is one of the spaces where particular techniques like Scrum or Kanban do struggle with, like what is a team commitment, what a team commitment means, individual commitment means, where you are spread out in many different projects with different stakeholders and priorities. That is really problematic. It's challenging. Taiga 6, as today, you do get the Kanban swim lane, and so you can create as many swim lanes, put it the way you want it, and think of it as a unified Kanban board. But we know that's not enough. It probably allowed us to rethink what's coming next, and definitely Taiga Next, which is the code name for what's coming next for Taiga, and it's going to be a big thing next year, is going to have not focus, but really sort out the multi-project, multi-team challenge, because it is the reality. We cannot deny this happens, and Taiga is not like perfectly suited to sort that out. So the answer is resounding yes. That is planned. So Yamila says, how can a team be aware of all the anti-patterns, like being waterfall with agile rituals? I think I'd say that a nice little trick that comes from Scrum, but you could apply that using Kanban or the Agile techniques, is to make sure that you have frequent retrospectives, frequent self-evaluation of the quality of the process, and having a set of questions that you always ask, particularly at the beginning, when you are not sure whether you are being trapped by these anti-patterns, right? This, of course, means that you trust yourself, like the team considers they are able to identify their issues. But I think it's fair to give them, the benefit of the doubt. So frequent retrospectives, like monthly or something like that, with some top items there as a beacon, that serves as a beacon, might actually help them identify whether they are not moving away from waterfall at all, or they're actually doing great progress. So yeah, that's one thing, and that is the continuous improvement thing. That is so much better to keep in mind, rather than this short iteration cycle that people repeat and repeat. It is continuous improvement, and this self-awareness of how agile or waterfall like you are, it's part of that continuous improvement. Tim, hi Tim. Quote budget. The customer wants to know how much his project is going to cost. How can you give a quote budget of a project that you will run in agile mode? Wonderful question. So what we do here is this no bullshit early estimation. We've done this, and we've experienced that in general there is a certain amount of estimation of the size of the project that will output the minimum value the product needs for the customer, and that is like a size. It's like a size in terms of value and work and features. Okay, and you commit not to specific features themselves, but the overall amount or size of the project. It's like, this project is worth. You probably remember the burn down. I say it was like 2,000 points. So you can use this as a metric, and decide that, and this works a lot, and this is another topic, which is agile contracts. We could do a webinar in the future if enough people are interested in agile contracts. But you can actually say, this minimum set of features, no matter what happened, we want. So that means do early estimation, not super detailed, but early estimation, to make sure that that is something is going, at some point or another, we're going to get this done. And then you have this extra list of features. You go them through some sessions, workshops, whatever, with some conversations. Remember this customer collaboration thing. It does happen before the project even starts. Customer collaboration is not something you start on day one, sprint number one. It comes before that, where it is sort of a gray area where some stuff is going to be decided to go in. Some stuff doesn't even be there. It's not even there, and it's going to enter at some point in the project. But this is more flexible. This is things nice to have or really valuable, but are not super core. With that in mind, you should be able to estimate based on time and materials, which is the the most the least sophisticated way of giving a quote, but based on the team's experience and the ability to develop similar things, you should be able to say, this is a years long project. This, we agree on this super core list of features. Those get extra detailed estimation, and then for the remaining time, we have this amount of user story points that could just basically get input from these 100 long user stories in no particular order. You get these exchange for free or change for free in Scrum, where as long as you haven't started the user story, changes for the same amount of user story points are allowed in the backlog. I think you know this. So, but it's good to have this core. It works nicely in terms of protect the whole team protects that independently of the short-term priority in the backlog. The team is always looking for that list has to be done, right? So I'll make sure they are up in the list as long as we can tackle with them. Hope this sort of answers your question. Yes, Gabriel, absolutely. When I was mentioning multi-project, multi-team, is regardless of the particular technique you're using. Taiga was born with two Agile techniques in mind, Scrum and Kanban. You could actually activate both if you know what you're doing in a project. And then you got wiki issues and some epics, etc. Right? But those we understand, despite the fact that some people just use issues only module in projects. We do get the Kanban and Scrum. Both use mostly the same underlying database model. So I'm not saying it's going to be like for free developing multi-team, multi-project for one or the other, but they're going to be able to just say, you pick your module, your technique, and you have multi-project. Please, people that are not familiar with Taiga might not know this, but you could actually start a project with Scrum and then for the right reasons, switch to Kanban. And it's a non-destructive transition. You could go back to Scrum. It's a different views. So thanks to this, we can provide in due time multi-project, multi-team, regardless of your preferred way of dealing with Agile. Yes. So yeah, good question, Gabriel. Okay, Mateja. In terms of embracing the change and the mentioned second anti-pattern, okay, how to incorporate emerging task incidents that will require mid-sprint reorganization and make it agile. This is when you have to be aware of which agile technique serves better your reality and the outcome you want to get. As I said, Scrum is not really good if your legitimate process needs to allow for interruptions, because Scrum with the sprint technique or the sprint artifact considers team commitment and protection of the sprint of the utmost importance. If you cannot guarantee that, again, for the right reasons, Scrum will just struggle with incident, task, or whatever. Now, if you are able to somehow predict how much time the team, and this is related to one of the earlier questions, how much the team has to devote to that, then Scrum could also work. For teams that are constantly bombarded with interruptions or emerging tasks, Kanban is like marvelous, because Kanban is don't feel bad if you have to stop something midway and take this new super priority thing. It's okay. But Kanban is not just allowing you to just go free as you please. Kanban will make sure that you do have metrics and you do measure your bottlenecks. And so if this is the case, and this is completely like over your head, to use Kanban, but make sure that you apply or you make use of the Kanban techniques to identify not that you have incidents or emerging tasks, which are completely legal, but you're dealing with throughput correctly, that you're not generating so much waste because these policies that I was mentioning, these clear policies, are not so clear, and so people tend to stop doing what they're doing and start doing new stuff. That generates a lot of waste. So I'd say go with Kanban if Scrum doesn't allow you to this deterministic or pseudo-deterministic capacity allocation. But make sure you measure the throughput at the end of the Kanban. That is, in a given time, how many tasks went through the whole life cycle, through the whole process. But yeah, Agile is all about embracing the change. I was mentioning earlier that in other methods or software development practices, change is a problem. It's so much linked to issue management as a change management. Like we have to manage change, and it's always this contract negotiation. Agile is change is okay, but by saying that, you have to give yourself tools to make sure that they are still okay, because you know what to do. They are, initially your reaction is good, but then you need to apply the techniques at different, whether it's Scrum or Kanban, the tools that they give you to make sure that the other thing that Agile matters, which is waste, is not going up. So I'd say look at the waste. If it's you keeping it low, then you're okay. If frustration is low, which is a correlation with waste most of the time, then you're doing it okay. And of course, Kanban gives you some interesting metrics in terms of bottlenecks. Okay, Tim. Thank you. Yeah, Jorge. No, that's great. All right, so I think we tried to make this 1 hour long. I think we made it. I mean, we were successful at this. I don't know if we were successful at other things or your expectations, but it's been a pleasure to be here with you today. This will get recorded. This is being recorded, and other people will enjoy. We had, hundreds of registered people that, due to time zone issues or other commitments, weren't able to attend live, but this is here to stay for some time. Be ready for Taiga Next. This is going to be amazing 2022 year. And if you want to know about this little sister project called penpod.app, design and prototype, open source, SVG, cross-functional teams, do take a look and tell us what you think about that, because we like both and how they will intersect one with the other. Again, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be here with you. Have a great rest of Wednesday, and see you soon.